My name is Jake Callahan. I'm 34 years old, and until recently, I thought my life was on track. I'd been married to Emma for almost 3 years. 3 years that, until now, I would have described as pretty damn good. We met in a way that might sound cheesy, but whatever. It was at a farmer's market in some small-town backwater in Oregon. She was at a stall buying peaches, and I was, well, buying the cheapest coffee I could find because I was broke and desperate for caffeine. She stood out immediately. Auburn hair, piercing blue eyes, and this confidence about her, even though she wasn't exactly smiling. She had that untouchable vibe, the kind that makes men do stupid things just to get noticed. And I was no exception. I played it cool, or thought I did. I made some casual comment about peaches being overrated compared to apples, hoping to get her attention. She rolled her eyes so hard, I thought they might get stuck in the back of her head. But hey, she didn't walk away. Small victories, right? Over the next few weeks, I accidentally ran into her around town, at the library, the grocery store, even her yoga class. Look, small towns make it easy to be a little stalkerish without it being creepy. Mostly. Eventually, I found out through a mutual friend that she'd recently divorced some deadbeat ex. She was wary of men, and I, like an idiot, saw it as my chance to play the good boy. I finally convinced her to go out with me. First date? Decent. Second date? Better. By the third, we were in my apartment, and well, let's just say she made sure I wasn't thinking with my brain anymore. Emma was addictive, gorgeous, witty, and in the bedroom? Let's just say she wasn't shy about taking control. She had this way of looking at me that made everything else fade. I was hooked. Completely. After 3 months, I popped the question, like the lovesick moron I was, and 6 months later, we were married. At first, life with Emma was like a dream. Weekends spent hiking or wine tasting, spontaneous trips to the coast, and enough passion to keep us both satisfied. But somewhere along the way, things started to shift. It wasn't sudden, like a lightning strike. More like a slow leak. The intimacy that had defined our relationship started to dwindle. Daily sex turned into a few times a week, then once a week, then, well, you get the idea. She spent more time on her phone, and when I tried to initiate conversations, she always seemed distracted. I brushed it off as stress or routine setting in. You know, normal marriage stuff. Until one day, I realized I didn't know who she was texting or why she kept her phone glued to her hand like it was an oxygen tank. So I did what any suspicious husband would do. I snooped. Let's be honest, snooping isn't a proud moment for anyone. It's not like I woke up one day and thought, hey, today feels like a good day to violate my wife's privacy. But Emma's behavior was setting off alarms in my head. The late-night giggles at her phone, the way she'd angle the screen away when I walked by, it all screamed, I'm hiding something. So one evening, while she was in the shower, I decided to check her phone. She always kept it locked, but I'd seen her type her PIN enough times to memorize it. Pro tip, don't type your code like a pianist doing a dramatic crescendo if you're trying to keep it secret. My hands were shaking as I unlocked it, and nothing. No texts, no incriminating photos, no trace of anything suspicious. For a second, I felt like an idiot. I was about to toss the phone back onto the counter when I noticed something odd. All her chat apps had their history wiped. Every single one. That wasn't normal. The problem with paranoia is that it doesn't go away when you find nothing, it just makes you dig deeper. I decided I needed more than a quick glance at her phone. I needed real proof, or at least the peace of mind that she wasn't cheating. So, I cloned her phone. For those of you who don't know, cloning a phone isn't something you can do with a YouTube tutorial and a wish. It took some work. Let's just say I had a buddy from college who was tech-savvy and owed me a favor. Within 24 hours, I had access to every text, call, and app activity Emma had on her phone, updated in real time. It didn't take long for everything to come crashing down. At first, the messages were casual, her and some guy named Mike chatting about random stuff. I thought, okay, maybe it's just a friend. But as I scrolled further, the tone shifted. Flirty jokes. Compliments that went beyond friendly. And then the bombshell. Mike, can't wait to see you again. Saturday at the motel, right? Room 7. Emma, yes. Finally. And a heart emoji. My stomach dropped. Mike Kramer. My friend. The guy I'd known since college. Blonde, good-looking, and rich as hell thanks to his daddy's stock market fortune. He was always a little too smooth for his own good, but I never thought he'd snake his way into my marriage. I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at my phone. I wasn't angry yet. That would come later. In that moment, I just felt hollow. I loved Emma. Hell, part of me still wanted to believe there was some mistake. But there wasn't. The texts kept coming, each one confirming what I didn't want to accept. She was cheating, and their big night was 2 weeks away. I could have confronted her right then. But what would that solve? She'd deny it, cry, maybe spin some story about how it wasn't what it looked like. No, I needed more than just her texts. I needed something she couldn't wriggle out of. And if I was going to go through the trouble of gathering evidence, I figured I might as well make it entertaining. Once the initial shock wore off, anger set in. But it wasn't the punch-a-wall kind of anger. It was cold, calculating. I wasn't just going to confront Emma, I was going to dismantle her whole world. And to do that, I needed leverage. I thought back to when we'd first started dating. Emma had always been tight-lipped about her ex-husband. She said he was a slimeball, and I didn't push for details because back then, I was too busy enjoying the view. Now though, that vagueness felt like a clue. If I was going to understand Emma, I needed to go to the source. Emma's hometown was about 2 hours away, so I left early one morning without telling her. She thought I was heading to a meeting, and I didn't bother correcting her. By mid-morning, I was standing on the main street of some forgotten little town that looked like time had skipped over it. I had no idea where to start. All I knew was Emma's maiden name and that her dad still lived around here. I was about to give up when I spotted a homeless guy sitting on a bench, holding a sign that said, "God bless, spare change." Something about him caught my attention. He looked weathered but sharp, like someone who'd seen too much and come out the other side. "Excuse me," I said, handing him a $10 bill. "Do you know a woman named Emma Carter? Used to be Phoenix." His eyes lit up like I just told him he won the lottery. "You're looking for trouble, friend," he said with a grin. "Call this number and say her name." He scribbled a phone number on a scrap of cardboard and handed it to me. Weird. Absolutely. But I was desperate. The number led me to a dingy little house on the edge of town. When I knocked on the door, a burly guy with a beard that could have doubled as a bird's nest answered. Behind him, a wiry man with sharp features was lounging on a couch, smoking a cigarette. "Who the hell are you?" the wiry guy asked. "Jake Callahan," I said. "I'm Emma's husband." That got their attention. The wiry guy raised an eyebrow, and the burly one burst out laughing. Not a polite chuckle, mind you, this was full-on tear-streaming, rolling on the floor laughter. It was so contagious that before I knew it, I was laughing too, even though I had no idea what the joke was. When they finally calmed down, the wiry guy wiped his eyes and said, "Sorry man. It's just, wow. She really doesn't change, does she?" Turns out, these two were Tom and Eric, Emma's ex-husband and his best friend. Over the next hour, they gave me a crash course in the Emma experience. According to them, she had a habit of wandering. Every few years, she'd start an affair, usually with someone flashy, before moving on to the next guy. Tom had been husband number 1. I was husband number 2. And Mike? Just her latest distraction. "She's got this itch," Tom said, shrugging. "It's like clockwork." "How long you been married?" 3 years, I said. They both laughed again. "Right on schedule." "So what now?" Tom asked. "You planning to divorce her?" I hesitated. "I don't know. I mean, yeah, probably. But not before I make her pay for this." Eric leaned forward, a wicked grin spreading across his face. "If it's revenge you want, I can help. But you gotta be all in. No half measures." I thought about it for a long moment. Could I really go through with it? Did I have it in me to burn her life to the ground? "Let's do it," I said. Eric clapped me on the shoulder. "Good. Finish your beer. We've got work to do." Eric didn't waste time. The second I said I was in, He was off and running with a plan that made me question just how much time he'd spent thinking about revenge scenarios. Tom, on the other hand, kept things grounded. "We're not just here to mess with her, Jake," he said, nursing his beer. "You need an exit strategy. No loose ends." "Like what?" I asked. "Divorce papers," Tom replied. "You've got a prenup, right?" I nodded. My dad had drilled that into me. "No prenup, no marriage," he'd said. It was the smartest thing I'd done with Emma, even if it felt cynical at the time. "Good," Tom said. "We'll need proof she's cheating to lock it in. And we'll make sure she gets exactly what's coming to her." The first step in Eric's plan was simple: humiliation. From Emma's texts, we knew that Mike, rich, clueless Mike, was planning a romantic surprise for her. He'd ordered 10,000 roses to be delivered to a secluded farm, where he'd set up some over-the-top lunch date. Wine bread, one of those polka-dotted tablecloths that scream, "I have money but no taste." It was disgustingly cliché. Eric had other ideas. "I've got a buddy who works at the flower company," he said. "He'll make sure the roses arrive a little early." "How early?" I asked. "Early enough for the bulls to notice." Apparently, the farm where Mike planned his romantic gesture was home to 5 massive bulls, none of which were particularly fond of intruders or, as it turns out, roses. Eric's guy delivered the flowers at dawn, and by the time Mike and Emma arrived, the field was a disaster zone. Trampled petals, overturned tables, and a few fresh piles of bull manure were the highlights. And Emma? She slipped in one of those piles while trying to escape the chaos. By the time she got up, covered in mud and God knows, Mike was busy fending off a particularly amorous bull that seemed to think his cologne made him irresistible. "Romantic enough for you, babe?" Eric joked when he showed me the photos later. I couldn't stop laughing. If the flowers were the appetizer, the next part was the main course. From the clone phone, we knew Emma and Mike were planning a private massage session at a gym Mike rented out for the morning. A new room massage, to be specific, something I had to Google and immediately regretted. "That's weird," I said, wincing. Eric just grinned. "It's about to get weirder." Apparently, Eric had a friend who owed him a favor. That friend happened to be the gym owner. By the time Emma and Mike showed up, everything looked normal. They worked out for a bit, showered, and got ready for their intimate massage. What they didn't know was that Eric had replaced the masseuse with his other friend, a guy nicknamed Tripod, for reasons that became immediately apparent. When Tripod walked in, naked, oiled up, and ready to perform, Emma screamed so loudly that people in the parking lot probably heard her. As she bolted out of the room, another guy, dressed as a monk and ringing a bell, started chasing her, yelling "Shame! Shame!" in gym full of confused patrons. Mike, meanwhile, was still lying on the massage table, blissfully unaware. I almost felt bad for him. Almost. After the massage fiasco, Eric and Tom decided it was time to finish things. The big motel date was coming up, and we had everything we needed to turn it into a disaster. I made sure the divorce papers were ready. "Once we've got proof she's done," Tom said. "Not just proof," Eric added. "She's gonna walk out of that motel wishing she'd never met you." The day of the big showdown felt like the calm before a storm. Emma had been more distant than usual, but she'd also tried to cover it with fake enthusiasm. She told me she had plans with friends and wouldn't be back until late. I gave her a half-hearted smile and said, "Have fun." Inside, I was counting the minutes. She left around noon, wearing a black dress that was too nice for a casual hangout. I waited until her car was out of sight, then grabbed my keys and headed to meet Eric and Tom at the Riverside Motel. Eric and Tom had booked room 8, right next to room 7, where Emma and Mike would be. "You're gonna love this," Eric said as he opened the door. Inside, the room was set up like a surveillance hub. 5 monitors displayed live feeds from tiny cameras they'd planted in room 7 earlier. There was one in the lamp, one in the smoke detector, and even one tucked into the TV stand. "How the hell did you manage this?" I asked. Eric shrugged. "Let's just say I know a guy." We sat down and waited. Sure enough, about 10 minutes later, Mike's shiny Dodge Charger pulled into the parking lot. He stepped out in a tailored suit, carrying a bottle of champagne. Emma followed, looking a little too excited for someone supposedly meeting friends. "This is it," Tom said, cracking open a beer. "Let the games begin." The first part of the plan was simple: annoyance. As soon as Emma and Mike entered the room and indulged in their games, we recorded everything we needed to confirm the affair, and then Eric made a quick call. 3 minutes later, there was a knock on their door. "Who is it?" Mike asked, already irritated. "Pizza delivery," a voice called out. Mike opened the door to find a delivery guy holding 5 large pizzas. "I didn't order this," Mike said, scowling. "It's already paid for," the delivery guy said with a shrug. "Enjoy." Mike grabbed the pizzas and shut the door, muttering something about pranksters. But before he could even put the boxes down, there was another knock. This time, it was Domino's with 3 more pizzas. Then KFC with 3 buckets of chicken. By the 4th delivery, tacos from some food truck, Mike was visibly fuming. Emma, meanwhile, was starting to look uneasy. "Think they're full yet?" Tom joked, stuffing chips into his mouth. The interruptions escalated. A maintenance guy showed up, claiming there was a water leak. A singing telegram burst in, serenading them with "Can't Help Falling in Love." And finally, a cop knocked on the door, asking about the Dodge Charger in the parking lot. "This your car?" the officer asked Mike. "Yeah, why?" "We found a pound of marijuana in the trunk," the cop said, deadpan. Mike's face went pale. "What? That's not mine." "Step outside, sir." The officer wasn't actually a cop, just one of Eric's friends in uniform, but Mike didn't know that. As he tried to argue, Emma stood frozen, her face a mix of horror and confusion. "Should we go for the big reveal?" Tom asked, glancing at me. I nodded. "Let's end it." Eric stepped inside to room 7, camera in hand. "Smile, lovebirds," he said, snapping a photo. Mike and Emma spun around, their faces screaming "oh shit." Before either could react, I walked in behind Eric, holding the divorce papers. "Surprise," I said, my voice icy. "Don't worry, Emma. I'll make this quick." She stammered something about it not being what it looked like, but I cut her off. "Save it. I have all the evidence I need. Congratulations. You just made this the easiest divorce of my life." I handed her the papers and walked out without waiting for a response. Behind me, I could hear Eric and Tom laughing as the fake cop arrested Mike. Emma tried calling me that night, twice, but I didn't answer. Instead, I sent her a text. "All communication goes through my lawyer now. Have fun explaining this to your friends." As for Mike, he wasn't just humiliated, he was blacklisted. Eric made sure the photos from the motel found their way to the local gossip circuit. By the next morning, everyone knew about Mike's big night, complete with pizzas, police, and public shame. The next morning, I woke up feeling something I hadn't felt in months: peace. Emma's absence wasn't a gaping void, it was a breath of fresh air. I grabbed a coffee, sat on my porch, and scrolled through my phone. The local gossip mill was already buzzing with last night's events. Photos of Emma and Mike leaving the motel, Mike in handcuffs and Emma looking like she'd seen a ghost, were everywhere. Someone had captioned it, "Riverside Romance Gone Wrong." It was petty, but I laughed anyway. Emma's world fell apart faster than I expected. By noon, her social media was flooded with comments, some supportive, but most brutal. Her so-called friends, the ones who always gushed about how perfect our marriage was, turned on her in a heartbeat. Mike didn't fare much better. His reputation as the charming golden boy of the town was officially toast. I didn't bother responding to the slew of messages Emma sent me over the next few days. Begging, crying, blaming, none of it mattered. My lawyer, Amy White, was handling everything now. A week later, we met at Amy's office to finalize the divorce papers. Emma sat across from me, looking like a shadow of the woman I'd married. Her confidence was gone, replaced by this nervous, jittery energy that made her seem smaller. "I don't know what you think you're accomplishing with all this," she said, trying to sound defiant. "We could have worked things out." I leaned back in my chair, keeping my tone calm. "Emma, the only thing I'm accomplishing is freedom. You're the one who threw this away." She tried to argue, but Amy shut her down with a legal masterclass. The prenup was airtight, and the evidence of her affair made it impossible for her to contest. She left the meeting with nothing but her car, her clothes, and a mountain of shame. Mike didn't just lose his reputation, he lost his freedom too. Turns out, that pound of marijuana in his car wasn't entirely fake. Eric, ever the opportunist, had tipped off a real cop about Mike's extracurricular activities, ensuring that his little stash wasn't overlooked. He got 6 months in county jail and a record that would haunt him for years. Poetic justice, if you ask me. Eric and Tom became regulars in my life after that. They'd drop by unannounced, always with a six-pack and a new story to tell. It was hard to stay bitter when you had two guys like them constantly reminding you to laugh at the absurdity of it all. One night, Eric asked, "So what's next for you?" I shrugged. "I don't know. Focus on work. Travel, maybe." Tom grinned. "Ever been to Thailand?" "Eric and I have a buddy there who might need some assistance." I laughed, shaking my head. "Let's handle one disaster at a time." A few weeks later, Amy called to let me know the divorce was finalized. "Congratulations," she said. "You're officially free." "Thanks, Amy," I replied. "I owe you one." "Dinner sometime?" she asked, her tone playful but serious. I smiled. "You know what? I think I'll take you up on that." As I hung up, I realized I wasn't just free from Emma, I was free to start over. And this time, I wasn't rushing into anything. Life had handed me a lesson wrapped in betrayal, and I intended to make the most of it. Emma moved back to her hometown, fading into the kind of small-town anonymity where nobody forgets a scandal. Mike, last I heard, was out of jail and struggling to rebuild his life. Poetic, considering he loved flaunting how perfect his world was. As for me, I wasn't just rebuilding, I was thriving. Work was better than ever, my circle of friends had grown, and Amy, well, let's just say things were looking promising. Life, for the first time in years, felt like mine again. They say living well is the best revenge, but honestly, sometimes, watching karma do its thing is even better.